El Pozolero, the stew maker. It was 2009 when Santiago Meza Lopez, El Pozolero, didn't care if he was seen crying, nor did he care what tens of news reporters, soldiers, and curious people wanted to take his picture or ask him how he made El Pozole, the Mexican stew, or how much the Sinaloa cartel paid him. He only cared about being forgiven by God. Santiago could barely open his eyes. The beating he had received when he was arrested left his face swollen. Crying was hurtful, but the cocaine dose he had inside made it bearable. Inside the Tijuana military base, the detainee was begging, "Please, forgive me." Meza Lopez was asking for forgiveness from the relatives of all the people he dissolved for 9 years, first under the orders of the Arellano Felix cartel, then under those of the Sinaloa cartel, when Teodoro Garcia Cemental, El Teo, switched sides. The job of Santiago Meza Lopez was to dispose of the enemies of a notorious drug baron by dissolving them in tubs of acid. Over several years, he claims to have disappeared 300 enemies of El Teo, a former henchman for one of the largest cartels. Meza, 45, told police that once their remains had been in the acid baths for 24 hours, he would bury them. In a twisted act of chivalry, he said he only dissolved men, refusing to make women vanish in this way. He said that he was paid $600 a week by El Teo. His horrific career came to an end on Thursday when he was ambushed by elite Mexican troops acting on a tip-off who caught him and 2 other drugs henchmen as they headed to a party with a prostitute in Tijuana. Armed with a machine gun, 3 rifles, and 2 hand grenades, plus body armor, Meza and the 2 others tried to flee but eventually gave themselves up without a fight. Some people say Santiago was crying because he didn't believe he was guilty. He thought life put him there, and that was the job intended for him. He claimed he wasn't a killer, he wasn't a kidnapper, he didn't see himself as a drug dealer. Soldiers remember him praying out loud when they were transporting him from Ensenada to Tijuana. He asked God for forgiveness. Sorry, he was hurt inside the Humvee in which he was being transported to Tijuana. The Mexican authorities paraded the stew maker in front of a nondescript shack where he admitted that he had disposed of the bodies over a period of 10 years. 2 grave-sized holes had been dug near the walls. The nickname Pozolero came from pozole, a stew local to Mexico and the southwest U.S. Its ingredients are normally corn, meat, and chili. Meza told police that his busiest time was in December 2007, when he claimed to have disposed of 32 bodies. Santiago Meza Lopez talked about his recipe on how to make pozole. It involved 2 large empty oil barrels, several pounds of sodium hydroxide, also known as lye or caustic soda, latex gloves, and gas masks. He was taught how to cook from men brought in from Israel. In the year 2000, the Arellano Felix brothers of the Tijuana cartel decided to use a new method to get rid of their enemies. Previously, they just dumped the bodies in the sewers or the river, but it was dangerous, or someone could catch them. Benjamin and Ramon Arellano Felix decided to bring people from Israel who knew how to dissolve bodies in acid. They trained a group of men, including Santiago, who in those days used to take care of drugs that were smuggled to the United States. Santiago gave details. He would begin by buying the empty oil barrels, then he dumped about 100 pounds of sodium hydroxide that he bought in a hardware store in the Mariano Matamoros community on the east side of Tijuana, the sodium hydroxide costing him roughly $1.50 a pound. A lady at the store once asked me why I bought so much sodium hydroxide. I told her I used it to clean houses, said Santiago Meza. The bodies that I was given to make pozole were already dead. I dumped them complete inside the oil barrels. Santiago was assisted by 2 young men who he identified as El Chalino and El Guillo, a pair of 25-year-olds who were also born in Sinaloa. Both left Guamuchil and arrived at Tijuana with the dream of making lots of money. They ended up learning how to make pozole. The way I would receive the bodies was when El Teo would call me to tell me that at a certain hour, in a certain place, I was to be given the merchandise. He would call me and tell me in which vehicle the bodies were in. They would signal me with a light and deliver the bodies to me, explained Meza. Santiago said that working with sodium hydroxide was very dangerous. He said he always wore protection, such as latex gloves and gas masks. The location was also selected well. They used a property located in a road to Tecate, a desolated area called Ojo de Agua. They would cook the pozole and dump it on pits. Relatives of 100 missing people came forward saying that they wanted to show photos of their loved ones to Meza in the hope he could find their loved one's fate. Cristino Palacios, president of Citizens United Against Impunity, which represented missing people in Tijuana, said, "We are here because this arrest gives us a ray of hope." Romel Moreno, the state's attorney general, said that Meza would be shown the photos to see if he recognized any among his victims. He said that the authorities were considering allowing the victims' families to meet him. Police searched the shack for human remains and asked U.S. authorities for DNA testing equipment. Fernando Osegueda, whose son disappeared in February 2007, said that eastern Tijuana was a stronghold of the drug lord El Teo Garcia. The Mexican government denied that parts of the country had become lawless, but Meza's arrest was a rare success story in the increasingly savage drugs war. Since the start of 2008, 346 people had died or disappeared in drugs-related violence, and Tijuana was one of the worst affected areas. The revelations were a gruesome chapter in a battle that stands out for tales of torture, brutal killings, and mutilated corpses. One cause of rising violence was a split between El Teo Garcia and his former bosses, the Arellano Felix brothers, which ignited a war between two cartels to dominate the drugs trade. The two split after a Tijuana shootout between their followers left at least 14 people dead. The level of violence had heightened concerns in the government about the damage it was doing to the country's image abroad. Patricia Espinosa, the Secretary for Foreign Affairs, asked foreign correspondents not to file negative reports about Mexico. The man who dissolved bodies in acid, the same man that cried that day he was arrested, had apparently been forgiven by God. At least that's what Rafael Romo